Hello students, tomorrow is your topic 4 test, so I want to just go over the extended response questions with you so you can use this to prep yourself for the test. But before we do that, we need to finish up with the questions on the topic 4 overview that you see on your screen here. So the next couple questions here: how did the U.S. contribute to World War I, and how did the outcome of the war lead the United States to become a major world power? So looking at the first one, some of the answers you could give there is we sent troops over. This helped to turn the tide against the Central Powers. And also prior to our involvement in the war, we sold weapons and supplies to both sides of the conflict. As far as the second one, how the U.S. became a major power, this is kind of the key thing about World War I for our conversation. We got involved in European wars. This is sort of the last step away from isolationism as laid out by Washington, avoiding getting involved specifically in European entanglements. We're now pretty much involved in the world. The economy and infrastructure of the United States was not damaged during the war, so after the war, we're going to come out of it pretty strong. We don't have to rebuild like the other major powers did. And also we were in on the peace negotiations. Wilson's 14 points did kind of shape some of the peace agreement, even though they ignored a lot of them in the Treaty of Versailles. Speaking of which, how did President Woodrow Wilson attempt to bring lasting peace through his 14 points? If you look at the graphic organizer for lesson 5, you'll see many of these listed there. No secret treaties, reducing armaments, getting rid of colonies, and the creation of a League of Nations. Those first 3 were trying to address some of the things that led to the war: alliances, militarism, imperialism. The last one was to create a way to bring lasting peace, which is the next question there. How would we do this? Well, they wanted to provide a place where nations could have their conflicts arbitrated rather than go to war. So it would provide a place to kind of talk it out before you get into a fight, essentially. And then lastly, then why did the U.S. Senate refuse to ratify the treaty? The primary reason is they felt it would violate Congress's constitutional power to declare war, because it was a mutual defense pact, which meant that the U.S. would have to fight to defend League members if they were attacked. And that would mean that the League Charter would have dictated we go to war instead of Congress as set aside or set out by the Constitution. So let's look at the 2 extended response questions. The first one here: describe 3 specific examples of the United States expanding its influence overseas between 1890 and 1915. This specifically excludes World War I. Explain how each example contributed to the United States becoming a world power. So this is mainly going to focus on lessons 1 and 2, on the Spanish-American War and American imperialism in the period between there and World War I. And so we've got to do 3 things. We have to give an example of the U.S. Expanding its influence. We have to explain how the U.S. was involved. So in other words, what is this expansion? How is this an expansion of U.S. power? And how does it lead to us becoming a world power? Now, you need 3 examples of this, and you need to do 3 things for it. So this is a 3 by 3. So for example, if we take Hawaii as one example, how was the U.S. involved? We overthrew their government. We annexed Hawaii. Then afterwards, in the interests of American sugar growers, how is this an example of the U.S. becoming a world power? We gained coaling station, naval base. This is our extension out into the Pacific Ocean to protect trade. So in addition to Hawaii, you've got many, many other examples. Some of them are still seen here: Puerto Rico, Philippines, Cuba, Mexico, China, Panama. Just for each one, explain how we got involved in that country's affairs, and how is this an example of us becoming a world power? Or maybe another way to look at it would be exerting our power. What are we doing to influence the rest of the world? The second one focuses then on the First World War. World War I, 2 ways our involvement in that war affected the lives of Americans. In 2 ways, it affected America's role in the world. So we're looking at the effects of the war on American people, and then also on America, on the United States as a nation. These are going to focus more on lessons 4 and 5, the last two. And so we're looking at examples of how it affected Americans' lives, as well as examples of how it affected the U.S.'s role in the world. So some examples of how it affected our lives. If you look at lesson 4, the 19th Amendment, Great Migration, Espionage Act, Food Administration, German Americans, Mexican immigration, anything from lesson 4 is going to be pretty much fair game for this. Just make sure you're explaining how it relates to America's involvement in the war. And then on the other side, U.S.'s role. You might say things about how the U.S. is becoming a world leader as a result of it. Our economic changes because the U.S. Doesn't have to rebuild after the war. We developed the League of Nations even though we didn't join it. And also, America was affected by, the number of troops that were killed in the war. The key thing to remember here is that you explain each. You need 2 ways it affected Americans' lives, 2 ways it affected our role as a nation, and you need to explain them. So it should be clear how this is a result of the U.S.'s involvement in World War I. All right, remember, test tomorrow. You have 4 windows in which you can take this test: 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 2. Get on during one of those, get into Progress Book, take the test, and good luck to you.